So welcome to this summer Zoom service, and really glad for having a few folks gathered with us this morning on this kind of cool and rainy summer morning. So I think probably everyone knows that I'm Reverend Annie Gonzalez, the Minister of Faith Development at First Parish in Bedford, but might as well say that. And that we're sort of in the midst of transition here in many ways, in terms of our senior minister transition, in terms of transitioning from Zoom only to a more hybrid building reopening mode. So transitions abound, and this is where we are today. So on that front, I wanted to name a couple of those details about all these transitions because it's a lot to track. The building is reopening for use. We're not shifting worship into the sanctuary yet, but we are opening the building for use by rentals, for use by small group ministries, committees, potlucks, etc. And starting Monday, you can contact Brenda Rybicki, our office administrator, either by phone or by email. She's using the same email address as Joan Petros used, the general office, UU Bedford, so that will work. And you can request to use the space. We're opening up the common room, the sanctuary, and room 204 for use, as well as the kitchen if you need the kitchen for whatever you're doing. And so you can start making those requests. We do have some guidelines that I sent out, and I will send them out again as a reminder around mask use and some things like that. So we will be sending those out, but you can indeed start officially using the building again. So that is exciting. And in terms of worship, our reopening task force will meet again to talk about that. Our hope is that we will be able to move back into our sanctuary for worship in the fall. Our hope and intention is to keep a hybrid option, meaning that there will be a way to access the service on Zoom live, is our hope. No promises, but that's our goal, because we know there are people who are living outside the area or who can just access worship easier if it is via Zoom. Next Sunday, we will have another Zoom service with a special guest. It's going to be really fantastic. So I really do hope folks will turn out for that. Musician and sort of itinerant preacher, though, in the age of Zoom worship, just Zooming in many time zones in one day, Matt Meyer, who is really creative and lovely. So I think that will be a lot of fun. That'll be next week for our service. And then just a reminder that we will have our new Director of Faith Development for Children, Lisa Maria Andrea Steinberg. I know I thought my name was long, but we can handle it. She'll be starting August 1st. Our interim minister, Wendy Bell, will be starting in August as well. She has a bit of vacation she had already planned, so she won't be available immediately August 1st, but I should get the exact date, but sometime in early August, she will be available as well. And we do have a little team that is starting to convene around hiring a sexton. So if you have any thoughts and concerns about that process, please be in touch. If you know anybody who might be excited to do that type of work, caring for our building, definitely keep your eyes out. But we will start looking to see, first of all, what exactly are we looking for, and then look for a person to do that important work. So that is coming. And I think that is all the announcement aspects for now, though, because we're kind of a small informal vibe. Does anyone have anything else important that I'm missing in terms of summer announcements? All right, excellent. Okay. Well, then we will move into our Unison Affirmation. And I wanted to make a note. I know last week, if any of you were some of you, I know you were there. I saw you on the common. We had our outdoor hybrid worship that I think went quite smoothly. And we said the Unison Affirmation only in English after saying it in English and Spanish for so long. And the staff had talked about that and thought that since Maria is no longer living in our building, and that was the impetus behind saying our Unison Affirmation in Spanish, that we would shift back to English. But I got an inquiry about that, understandably, because that context was not offered. I just dropped the Spanish. And so, we'll think about, I got a suggestion around, well, wouldn't it be nice to try different languages that are meaningful to our community in some way, whether that's Hungarian because of our Transylvanian connection, or maybe, some other language that we have, some connection to in our community. And I thought that was an interesting idea. So we'll think about it. But today we will be in English again, as we were for quite some time before we had a 3-year sanctuary guest, which was a wonderful experience and also a challenging one. So here we go. Let me get this shared properly. All right. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. Thank you. All right. So this morning's opening reading is from a piece called "So You're Thinking About Becoming an Abolitionist" by Mariam Kaba. And here is how it goes. Prison industrial complex abolition is a political vision, a structural analysis of oppression, and a practical organizing strategy. While some people might think of abolition as primarily a negative project, let's tear everything down tomorrow and hope for the best, prison industrial complex abolition is a vision of a restructured society, a world where we have everything we need: food, shelter, education, health, art, beauty, clean water, and more. Things that are foundational to our personal and community safety. Every vision is also a map. As freedom fighter Kwame Ture taught us, when you see people call themselves revolutionary, always talking about destroying, but never talking about building or creating, they're not revolutionary. They do not understand the first thing about revolution. It's creating. Prison industrial complex abolition is a positive project that focuses in part on building a society where it is possible to address harm without relying on structural forms of oppression or the violent systems that increase it. Some people may ask, does this mean that I can never call the cops if my life is in serious danger? Abolition does not center that question. Instead, abolition challenges us to ask, why do we have no other well-resourced options? And pushes us to creatively consider how we can grow, build, and try other avenues to reduce harm. Let's begin our abolitionist journey not with the question, what do we have now and how can we make it better? Instead, let's ask, what can we imagine for ourselves and our world? If we do that, then boundless possibilities of a more just world await us. And so with that, I want to introduce special guest Megan Kelly. So Megan was a student in my campus ministry at UC Davis back when I was the intern and campus minister at the UU Church of Davis, California, back in 2012 and 2013. And Megan is now a young adult member of that congregation, and I think going on to the board as well as a worship associate there. And in that congregation, they have worship associates who support the services. And I was invited to do a Zoom service out in California this summer by my former supervisor, who's still the minister there, Reverend Beth Banks, which I was delighted to say yes to. And I was even more delighted when Megan was the worship associate I was assigned, and then triply delighted when she said, well, do you want me to come to your service too? Because I said, well, if I'm going to do a Zoom service for California, which will be in the afternoon here, might as well do the same one for my congregation in the morning. It won't be exactly the same. It's a little different, but very similar. So Megan said, would you like me to come do my reflection for your service? And I said, that's at 7 a.m. in your time zone. And she said, that's okay. I'm a morning person. So I'm very, very delighted that Megan Kelly will share some words with us this morning.
Good morning, everybody. So when there's not a global pandemic going on, I volunteer with the UU Pacific Central District of California middle school program called MUGS. We put on events throughout the year at congregations or at campsites during the summer. We provide a space for middle school aged youth from throughout the UU district to come together in community. They learn, they fail, they grow. And so do the adults volunteering with them. We learn, fail, and grow as much, if not more, than they do. One of the most beautiful things about this to me is teaching young folks that failure is a part of life. It gives them a safe space to fail, try new things that might or might not work out. There are others around to help pick up the pieces and to help them learn when those mistakes happen. At one event, one of the youth who was helping to coordinate many of the activities had an idea for what to do with the time right before lunch. The idea that they had seemed complicated and confusing to me, and I explained that to them. They heard my concerns and told me, I want to try it anyways. I said, okay, and asked if they needed any help. I was told, no, I'm good. And I let them know that I would be there if they changed their mind. The time for the activity rolled around, and I stayed nearby in case they changed their mind. As they started to explain the activity, many of the youth had questions and seemed generally confused. The youth leading the activity continued right on explaining, and after a few minutes said, well, let's just try it and see how it goes. Now, you might be wondering what the activity was. Me too. To this day, I couldn't tell you how the activity was supposed to go or what the idea really was. When the youth was done explaining, they looked at the gathered crowd for a while and realized no one was doing anything. They looked over at me, shrugged, and walked away. Another adult whose role for the event was to take kind of emotional care of those in need of it followed the youth. I got the group busy with another activity. I want to see more of this in the world. I want there to be opportunities to fail and have that be okay. Times to say, oh, well, that didn't work. What can my community do to help me fix it? Or better yet, I want to live in a world where I feel safe to make a mistake, shrug, and walk away, knowing that someone else will make things happen and that no one will think any differently of me for it. Later at lunch, I was sitting with that youth leader, kind of checking in just to make sure they felt okay and to see if they were okay with all the plans we had for the afternoon. They said they were good and they were glad they had tried the activity. Another youth walked over at that point and said, hey, I thought your activity sounded fun. Can you tell me more about your idea? That's the world I want to live in. A world where mistakes become moments for a community to learn. I want to be part of a community where people fail trying big things, and that's okay because there's others to pick up the pieces. I want to practice falling and learning and failing as gracefully as those 12-year-olds did. Are you with me?
Incredible. I love that. And it actually fits so perfectly with our offertory this morning, which is a video we've used in worship before. But I really thought it was the perfect time to reboot it. And it was indeed, it was a success, but it was one of those creative experiments with youth that we did over the pandemic. And it gave us opportunities just like that to just try it and see what would happen. And in this case, very talented youth in our congregation, Emery Carroll, wanted to try some new editing software and create a piece of music for us. And there was another youth in the congregation, Catherine Nickel, who was very nervous about playing and did it anyway. And her mom was so proud. So this morning, when we have our moment for the offering, I also just want to remind us that this is a community where we make space for that sharing and for that opportunity to try and fail and try again.
You want to sit here? You can get in.
Oh, and maybe I should do some more muting, but yes. So we'll have that. Without further ado, here is our All Beautiful, the March of Days, edited by Emery Carroll.
Oh dear. Complexities of life are too much for me.
A wonderful piece. I enjoyed it all over again so much. Though I was so excited to play the video, I didn't put up our ways to contribute to the offering. So I will just give that a brief moment, though we may all be well familiar with it by now, but just in case anyone was looking for that offering slide with that information, didn't want to cover up any of the fabulous video. and all the ways that you give to and strengthen this community are deeply appreciated always. On Friday, I found myself in the car driving, stuck in some traffic on I-93, regretting my choices. I was headed up to Vermont with my housemate and my daughter Moira. We were going to meet up with a colleague friend of ours, a UU minister who is the minister in Montpelier, Vermont, who had invited us to join her at a farm that rented to families. And all the other families going were from that area of Vermont, but we felt like we would really love to go, and we really like this friend, and it might be worth it to go all the way from Boston for one night. So there we were. We were supposed to arrive between 3 and 5 so that we could get our bags taken up to our yurts and we could get a tour, and then dinner was at 6, and the GPS was telling us we were gonna get there by 7. So this was not going the best. But I will say that as soon as we arrived, all my regrets went away. We were welcomed so warmly by the kindest staff who took our bags and drove them away in a little golf cart type contraption and ushered us into this barn that was decorated with beautiful hanging lights to eat salad and pizza that was with farm fresh ingredients made right there on site in their pizza oven they had built. And after dinner, we were all ushered to a campfire that overlooked this beautiful valley. And one of the staff there, who had been living there and running this place as a farm and retreat center for quite some time, told us the story of the place. And he started way, way, way back, telling us about when the mountains at the top of the Appalachian Trail, the Appalachian Mountains, when they were the biggest mountains, when they were new mountains, when they were as big as the Himalayas. And he talked about craning your neck up and you would not even see the peaks of the mountains. And then he told us about glaciers and how we would have been underneath a mile of ice. And how the glaciers moved through that part of the world and scraped everything down to stone. But how there were little pockets of places that the glaciers didn't scrape, little places where there was still earth, and those were the seed beds. He called them refugia, refuges. And from those little spots, he said they ranged from 1/4 of an acre to 50 acres. From those little places, all the life in that valley came back into being. He talked about how there was a sheep boom in the 1800s. I didn't know about this. And that there were so many settlers in that area. He talked about how he knew the name of the first settler from Ireland who had come to that farm, but how he didn't know the names of any of the Abenaki who lived there, and how he imagined that what they believe is that the land had already been cleared where that farm was because the Abenaki had cleared it to live there, and that this first settler from Ireland who had come there probably displaced them, probably not in a kind way. But I guess during the sheep boom, they cut down all the trees in this area. And he talked about how if we were looking out of that beautiful tree-covered valley, we would have just seen bare stone. He talked about how all the wildlife started to completely disappear because it was just sheep grazing land. He talked about different ways the farm had been used, how it was used during World War II as part of a war effort. And then he talked about how the trees came back and how that land was put under the first conservancy in Vermont, and how the wildlife came back, and how he had seen a mountain lion recently, even though the Fish and Wildlife Service say they aren't there. And after the story, when we went back to our little yurt village, I was talking with my housemate and she said, I felt like I was going to start crying during that story and I don't know why. I said, me too. It was just something about the bears coming back. And I think it's because there's so much that has been irreparably lost, both in the big picture of our history and in the little pictures of our lives. There's so much that has been damaged and hurt that we can't change, we can't make better. And there are ways to spread life, to conserve life, to make it so the bears can live there and the mountain lions, whether they are really there technically or not. And it was really, really moving to be at this farm because there was so much care and attention to life there, to the blueberries they were growing, and to all the people they welcomed in, and to the way they cared for the food and the way they used energy. So many solar panels everywhere and little solar powered lanterns lighting every path. It was a place where they were creating the kind of world that we want to be living in. And it made me think about a phrase that I love, that I know I've said many times before to you all, from one of my favorite books, Emergent Strategy by Adrienne Marie Brown. And that principle is, what you pay attention to grows. And at this farm, they wanted to pay attention to the refugia, the seed beds where the life had come from, not to all that was scraped away by the glacier, to the refugia. And in fact, he told us in part of this story that the farm had been used as a refuge, a literal refuge, for literal refugees coming from Central America in the 80s, making their way to Canada. It was a really beautiful story, all in all, full of the hard things about our world and all the beautiful ways humans can try to combat those hard things. What you pay attention to grows. It's tricky, that maxim, because if you refuse to pay any attention to any of the negative things, that's also not healthy. If we just ignore all the violences, the hard things, the loss, all that's been scraped bare, that could be denial, or that could even go into the realm of what they call toxic positivity, the kind of mindset where you say, well, just manifest what you want to see in the world and look on the bright side. And that's not my theology. I'm not a just look on the bright side and manifest the good type person. I think it's incredibly important to be realistic. And I think it's really, really vital to acknowledge and honor what is lost and what is hard and what is painful. So what you pay attention to grows is not about just averting your gaze, pretending that hard history isn't there. But I think it's more about the tending as you look at what is real and what is hard. As Kwame Ture says in that reading I read before, when you see people call themselves revolutionary, always talking about destroying, but never talking about building or creating, they're not revolutionary. And this is actually why I'm an abolitionist. I'm an abolitionist because people taught me and showed me the possibilities. People built community safety teams that we could call instead of the cops at conferences. People showed up to have really hard conversations about harm and repair that never involved police or lawyers, even though they easily could have. People showed up to really hard conversations about harm and repair where the police and courts were already involved, but we were still going to live into our theology as hard as we could. People, and in my case, almost exclusively women of color, have shown me that it is possible to build a world without cops and cages. That it's really, really hard. It's not simple, it's not utopia, but it is for real. And so this is one of the many things I mean when I use the word faith. I'm the minister of faith development, and people have wondered what that means, and sometimes I wonder what that means. But I know that one way I engage and practice faith is by believing in things that seem nearly impossible, but are honest, real visions. I lose and regain that faith constantly because this world is full of hard realities, big picture hard realities, and those little, small, but completely overwhelming to us hard realities of our lives. Recently, I've been listening to the audiobook version of Braiding Sweetgrass, and many of you probably know that we are planning programming around that book throughout the church year, this coming church year. And I've been really savoring it, but it also has made me cry more than once because it talks about some of the history of this land, the displacement of Indigenous people, and the enormity of that harm and loss is just too much to comprehend. And I find it so overwhelming. And the same is true when I think about not just the past, but the future. When I think about what we have done to this planet and what is happening and what it will be like for my child growing up, I get so overwhelmed. But also, Braiding Sweetgrass zooms in. It zooms in on something like wild strawberries. And you can be right there with the author in the field, rolling over to see if they're ripe yet every 5 minutes. And when I listened to that chapter after I was done crying about all that has been lost and all that will be harmed, I got my little basket of strawberries out of the fridge that came from our CSA from Stone Soup Farm, and I sliced up a few and put them in my cereal, and I savored them. And I can tell already that Braiding Sweetgrass is helping me to develop my faith, to put a little more trust in possibilities for the future of this planet, to tend and to pay attention to our CSA, and to pay attention to that egg share. Maybe we're getting a meat share. To care for the houseplants in my room for the first time in my life, because I am not a houseplant person, but I am tending them. I'm trying to figure out how much water. Remember to open your curtains and give them some sun. It's funny because I am a rather picky eater, though I have strived very hard to undo that over the course of my life. And I historically, and really still currently, I must say, don't like zucchini. And anybody knows, what do you get when you focus on local produce? You get zucchini. Well, not for you, Megan. You get everything. You're in California. But for us in New England, you get zucchini. But last week, I valiantly took my CSA zucchini and I said, I'm going to eat this. And I sliced it up into very thin slices and I sauteed it and I put some pesto that was made from our CSA basil on it. And I added some noodles and I ate it. And I ate it because that's what I want to pay attention to things that are growing here and now. to sustainable food practices. Which isn't to say I'm not also eating a million unsustainable things. But the little refugia, the little seed beds, the little places where we're creating what we want to see. I'm trying to pay attention to that, and I'm also trying to pay more attention to the land and to its history. It was such a perfect coincidence that right when I'm leaning further into that piece of faith, I got to go to this farm and hear such a profound story of land. I'm trying to get better at remembering to learn who lived on this land, who lived on this land a long, long time ago before the European settlers. So I'm paying attention. I'm not ignoring the weather reports. I'm not ignoring all that is going on. I know the irreparable harm has been done. And I don't know, maybe this paying attention is just a way to get through and not lose your mind. I cook the zucchini, I eat it stubbornly, and California still burns down, and climate refugees still pour in, and more jails are built to hold them, maybe. But maybe it's also like how it is right now with the Boston Immigration Justice Accompaniment Network and the Plymouth County Jail. We are demanding some things that sound like destruction, shut down Plymouth, release people, end the 287G, which is an agreement that allows local police to function as ICE officers. And we do want to shut it all down because they are keeping people on 26-hour lockdowns and denying people medications and serving rotten food and blocking our phone numbers so that people can't call us anymore. And we do want to destroy all of that. And we're trying to create something too. We have these kind of awkward weekly Zoom calls where we don't really know who all to expect, but it's some combination of organizers from New England and people who have been in immigration jail in Plymouth and gotten out, and people whose husbands are in there right now, and lawyers from the ACLU who are trying to play in their lane and by their rules, and other lawyers who got sick of staying in their lane and started just advocating. And sometimes those meetings are people just sharing the hard, awful stories and other people witnessing. And sometimes it's a planning meeting about what we're going to say to Elizabeth Warren's staffers when we meet with them. And sometimes it's just getting the information about folks inside who we can send a little commissary money to so they could buy a little snack because they are getting served rotten food, and it's all we can do. There's collaboration and care. There's people risking a lot of trust and people holding on to their humanity and the humanity of others, even when every day they're told maybe they're not really human. And those practices are a little piece of refuge, a little refugia. Because even when there's a mile of ice, little seed beds survive in the corners. Life persists. So let's cultivate it. Let's create. And let's pay attention.
Can you get me my vitamins?
And let's take our vitamins.
Yeah, it's important. It's really, creating a lot of things. We have a closing hymn that I will share. And I really do invite you to sing along if you know the words. It's a pretty simple set of words, and it does repeat. And the name of the hymn is "We Are Building a New Way," because I think we are. I think we're doing that in First Parish in Bedford in a lot of different ways. We're building new ways because we have all this staff transition. We're building new ways because we're figuring out what a coming back from COVID vaccinated community looks like. And we're building new ways because that is what this community has done over and over, is figured out how to be a refugia, how to be a place that cultivates life and ideas and literally houses people who need refuge. And so I invite you to join in. This particular production of this hymn is from the UU Society of Grafton and Upton. And I need to find the video. Here we go.
We are building a new way. We are building a new way. We are building a new way, feeling stronger every day. We are building a new way. We can feed our every need. Every need. We can feed our every need. Every need. We can feed our every need. Start with love, that is the seed. We can feed our every need. Peace and freedom is our cry. Peace and freedom is our cry. Peace and freedom is our cry. Without these our world will die. Peace and freedom is our cry. We are building a new way. We are building a new way. We are building a new way, feeling stronger every day. We are building a new way. A new way, a new way, a new
Thank you all for being part of our service this morning and for all the ways that you are paying attention to each other and to what needs care in your heart and soul, body, community, and for all the ways that you are paying attention to what needs to grow, to what we can tend, to what we can create together. May it be so.